You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. So I'd imagine that just like war axes and battle axes, two of the most overlooked weapon types in Skyrim are maces and warhammers. Now, I don't know if that's because most NPCs in Skyrim seem to wield swords or greatswords, but I ultimately think it's a shame because in a certain way, both maces and warhammers are probably the best weapons when it comes to both one-handed and two-handed weapons respectively. While swords randomly crit and axes will deal bleed damage based on perks, maces and warhammers have the Bonebreaker and Skull Splitter perks, which grant the ability to ignore anywhere between 25 to 75% of the enemy's armor. This is on top of the fact that both maces and warhammers typically deal more damage than either swords or axes. So these weapons are perfect up against tougher enemies with lots of armor. Now, one quick thing before we start, this video doesn't contain very many maces. However, the ones that are included are what I consider to be exceptional. So, without further ado, these are the top 9 best maces and warhammers in Skyrim Remastered, starting now. Number 9, the Champion's Cudgel. This is probably one of the cooler looking warhammers in Skyrim. It's also the only two-handed weapon in Skyrim with an Imperial theme, so this means if you roleplay and want a matching weapon for your Imperial armor, this is going to be your only choice. It's also worth mentioning that the Champion's Cudgel is also the only guaranteed weapon in Skyrim that has the Chaos Damage enchantment, and is the most reliable way to learn it through disenchanting. So I would say for that reason alone, it might be worth picking this weapon up, especially if you haven't come across any other weapons with the Chaos enchantment. As a weapon, the base damage and weight are fairly decent for what this thing is. Unfortunately, the Champion's Cudgel can't be upgraded unless you have mods installed. So if you're playing an entirely unmodded version of Skyrim, you're going to be limited on how much you can upgrade this particular weapon. At the same time, this could be a nice weapon to acquire earlier on in the Dragonborn DLC if possible. You will need to kill General Falk's Carius at Fort Frostmoth. Later on in the game, you could always place this on your wall if you don't need it anymore. Number 8, Volendrung. So Volendrung is a unique warhammer with a fairly powerful absorb stamina enchantment. The Volendrung also sports an above average base damage of 25, as well as a respectable weight of 26 encumbrance. As far as encumbrance goes, the Volendrung deals more damage and weighs the same as the standard Orcish warhammer, the DAWNGUARD rune hammer, as well as the standard DAWNGUARD warhammer, all while having superior base damage. Unfortunately, the Volendrung doesn't benefit from smithing perks, so while it can be upgraded to improve its damage, you're not going to be able to achieve double improvement like you will on most other weapons. This makes it much less viable at higher levels when weapons start to really see tangible benefits from having a higher smithing perk. You may also find that if you have a lot of stamina to begin with, that the Volendrung's own stamina absorption is redundant. That said, the attack speed on Volendrung does seem to be slightly faster than normal, so you may be able to make use of the enchantment more than you would on another warhammer. Volendrung is alright if you ask me. Along with the Champion's Cudgel, it's easily one of the better looking weapons in Skyrim. I just wish that the Volendrung had a more interesting enchantment, or that it benefited from double improvement without the installation of mods. To get Volendrung, complete the Cursed Tribe quest for the Daedric Prince, Malakath. Number 7, the Mace of MOLAG Ball. Okay, so the Mace of MOLAG Ball is one of 3 maces that I would consider to be among the best maces in Skyrim. It has a good combination of base damage and weight, and for a weapon that you can obtain relatively early on, it has a fairly decent combination of enchantments. The enchantments on offer here include Damage Stamina, Damage Magicka, and Soul Trap. This weapon would be pretty good up against most enemies, including both warriors and mage-type enemies. The addition of Soul Trap allows you to obtain souls from enemies so that you can refill the weapon's enchantment in case it runs out as well. Or if you have a couple black soul gems, you could obtain a few grand souls from some humans for really powerful enchantments on other weapons that you might have. That said, the Mace of MOLAG Ball is flawed in the sense that it doesn't benefit from any smithing perks and thus can't achieve double improvement. This makes the Mace of Molag Bal inferior to the other two maces that will appear later on in this video. Even still, this is a mace that you should try to acquire early on if you want a mace. In order to get the Mace of Molag Bal, you will have to enter the abandoned house in Markarth and go through the House of Horrors DAEDRIC side quest. In case you're curious, the rusty mace that you receive during this quest becomes the Mace of Molag Bal. Number 6. The DAWNGUARD RUNE Hammer. This is sort of a quirky but good warhammer. Like the standard DAWNGUARD warhammer, the rune hammer does benefit from the steel smithing perk, thus you can get double improvement. Also, like other DAWNGUARD weapons, you deal more damage than normal to vampires, making this very useful up against them. And speaking of vampires, you may also like the DAWNGUARD rune hammer's unique enchantment. If you block and then bash on the ground, you can place a fire rune that will deal 50 points of fire damage when an enemy touches it. This could prove to be very useful up against trolls, vampires, and other enemies that are weak to fire damage. What's also nice about this enchantment is it doesn't cost magicka in order to place the fire rune. You will expend some stamina instead, which can be useful for characters with high stamina but low magicka. Apparently, you can also level up your destruction skill if the runes you cast with this hammer deal damage to your enemies, so that's also a nice plus as well. This would be a very useful hammer to acquire for lower level characters that are putting together a two-handed build. The ability to level two-handed and destruction at the same time, while also having a weapon with a decent enchantment, could prove quite useful earlier on. The weapon is still relatively decent later on as well. To get the rune hammer, you will receive it randomly upon completing the Lost Relic Radiant side quest mission for the DAWNGUARD. Number 5. The DAEDRIC Warhammer. Now, I'm not going to recommend the DAEDRIC Mace for some reasons that I'll get into later on in this video. However, the DAEDRIC Warhammer is going to be the second most powerful craftable warhammer in Skyrim. In terms of base damage output, it's only going to be surpassed by the Dragonbone Warhammer, which requires DLC for the original version of Skyrim. If you have Skyrim Special Edition, you're good. This is going to be one of your best choices for a warhammer if you want something that you can enchant. I'd imagine if you combine this with something like shock or ice damage, you would have something that's quite useful for taking down either mages or warrior type enemies respectively. That said, there are better warhammers out there. Plus, a disadvantage of this warhammer is that the crafting components are relatively uncommon or rare. So, for example, Daedra hearts can be difficult to find, and ebony ingots are somewhat uncommon as well. I think that you'll find that in the long run, Dragonbone is going to be much more readily available to use for crafting weapons. While you'll need a higher smithing skill and more perk investment to craft Dragonbone weapons, I'd ultimately say that you're better off worth waiting. It's up to you, but I would wait for the Dragonbone Warhammer if possible. Number 4. The Ebony Mace. So I imagine this will be a surprise for some people. But believe it or not, the Ebony Mace is superior to the DAEDRIC Mace. Both of these weapons have the same base damage, however the Ebony Mace manages to be lighter than the DAEDRIC Mace. For that reason, if you're playing Skyrim and you haven't started any of the DLC, this will be the best craftable mace available to you. Plus, you don't need a Daedra heart to make one, and that's always nice. Now, something that's important to note is that if you're playing Skyrim Special Edition with the unofficial Skyrim patch, that particular mod nerfs the Ebony Mace, and for that reason, you're better off using the DAEDRIC Mace instead. So if you're noticing low damage numbers in this video, it's because I have the unofficial patch for Skyrim installed. If you're playing mod free, go with the Ebony Mace as it's not only lighter, but it also deals the same amount of damage as a DAEDRIC Mace. Now, there is also the Ebony Warhammer, but honestly, I don't think it's as good as the DAEDRIC Warhammer, so I wouldn't even bother with it. However, if you want the best mace that you can get before starting any DLC content for Skyrim, the Ebony Mace is where it's at. Number 3. The LONGHAMMER. The LONGHAMMER is a unique orcish warhammer with a really nice enchantment. The additional effect reads that this hammer has reduced weight, which allows it to be swung more quickly. The best part is that the Longhammer gets no damage decrease when compared to a regular Orcish Warhammer, and it also benefits from the Orcish smithing perk. If you want, you can also enchant the Longhammer and give it additional effects at an arcane enchanter. When it comes to weight, the standard Orcish Warhammer provides the player with 26 encumbrance, while the Longhammer provides the player with just 18 encumbrance. The Longhammer, for that reason, is the lightest Warhammer in Skyrim, and that means you're getting less stamina drain with the Longhammer than any other Warhammer in Skyrim. Just as the enchantment says, you're also gaining the ability to attack faster than you normally could with a regular Warhammer. What's also cool is because this inherent ability isn't a conventional enchantment, it can be combined with the Elemental Fury Shout, which will allow you to greatly increase your DPS. A similar effect can be achieved with Valdur's Dagger, though that weapon boosts critical hit chance. To get the Longhammer, you will need to go to Liar's Retreat and look for the corpse of Rod. Assuming you find him, you should be able to get access to this really nice Warhammer. Number 2, the Dragonbone Warhammer. Just like the episode on war axes and battle axes, the Dragonbone Warhammer and the Dragonbone Mace are the highest base damage weapons in their respective classes. While the Dragonbone Warhammer is something that I feel like I can recommend to you guys, the Dragonbone Mace is simply too heavy for how much damage it deals. The Dragonbone Mace provides the player with 24 encumbrance and is heavier than most Warhammers in Skyrim. To put it in perspective, the Dragonbone Mace is almost as heavy as VOLENDRUNG. Let that sink in for a second. So the DAEDRIC Mace, the Ebony Mace, the Mace of MOLAG Ball, and STALHRIM maces all weigh considerably less and have just 1 point less base damage. The question that you've got to ask yourself as far as the Dragonbone Mace is concerned, is it really worth it to have just 1 more point base damage, but also to have a weapon that has 24 encumbrance? The Dragonbone Warhammer, on the other hand, is a lot more reasonable. While it's still the heaviest Warhammer in Skyrim, you're still getting the best damage with this thing. Ideally, you're going to want to enchant this with a powerful enchantment, and then use it up against really tough enemies. Dragonbone weapons require the DAWNGUARD add-on, but if you have Skyrim Special Edition, you should have all of Skyrim's DLC. Just kill some dragons, raise your smithing skill, and make yourself a Dragonbone Warhammer. Number 1, the STALHRIM Mace. I would say that while the STALHRIM Warhammer is really good, the STALHRIM Mace is probably Skyrim's best craftable mace, provided that you have the Dragonborn add-on. If you have Skyrim Special Edition or Skyrim Remastered, you're good, you can get the STALHRIM Mace. Like all STALHRIM weapons, both Chaos Damage and Frost Damage enchantments are stronger when applied to STALHRIM weapons. However, the big advantage the mace has is that it has the same base damage as the DAEDRIC and Ebony maces, while weighing less than both of them. In a certain sense, think of the STALHRIM Mace as a more customizable version of the Mace of MOLAG Ball. While it doesn't come with an enchantment, some enchantments are stronger when applied to the STALHRIM Mace, and it can benefit from double improvement as well, which is something that can't even happen on the Mace of MOLAG Ball. Otherwise, the STALHRIM Warhammer is pretty good as well. It's completely superior to both the Glass and Ebony Warhammers in terms of base damage, and it has a more practical weight than both the Dragonbone and DAEDRIC Warhammers. If stamina drain is an issue, I would actually recommend trying the STALHRIM Warhammer out. Plus, you also get that Chaos Damage boost and Frost Damage boost if you apply those enchantments to the STALHRIM Warhammer. Ultimately, I think STALHRIM War Axes, Battle Axes, Maces, and Warhammers are great, and are definitely recommended. The one-handed War Axes and Maces, though, are probably the best of the bunch. Alright guys, that's going to pretty much wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like, and as always, take care, and I'll see you all next time.